Welcome to Multifamily Grit, where we bring in the experts to share the pros and cons and celebrations and struggles of the most important industry in the U.S., multifamily property management, where we manage millions of apartment homes for over 100 million U.S. residents. Today, we are chatting with DeAnna Moore, president of Elmington Property Management, about the people experience. Residents, employees, vendors, owners, applicants, everyone involved in multifamily. How we set the standards of excellence and how people then experience us. Something DeAnna and I are both extremely passionate about. And before we get started, we are sponsored today by Fortress OS, the only core property management operating system built with an emphasis for today's affordable operators. Ready for your applicants, leasing agents, and compliance team to love the software they work in and the job they do every day? Fortress revolutionizes affordable management and reduces applicant move-in time to save money, generate cash, and drive your teams to success. If you like what you hear today, please like and subscribe. Now, DeAnna, thank you so much for being here today. I'm honored to not only call you my business partner, but to have the opportunity to learn from you constantly. Before we dig in, I'd love for you to share how you got your start in the industry.
Thank you, Kerri. I'm excited to be here today. And you know what? That was really professional. Not that I would have expected anything less from you, but I feel like I'm in a really professional environment I wasn't expecting this morning. So
Hey,
thank you for
it's our second one. So clearly we know what we're doing now.
Thank you for having me. So how I got started in the industry, I was studying fashion in college, and I really just wanted a discount on rent. And so I started working at an apartment community to get, at the time, like a 50% discount, which isn't that crazy.
Yeah.
Like I was just a part-time leasing consultant, and they're like, here's 50% rent. It was
Don't
great.
see that anymore.
You don't see that anymore. And so, through that process, I loved what I did. I was helping people. I was enjoying helping them find their new home. And I still love fashion. That's still a passion of mine. But I went down this road instead, and I've enjoyed it and have never looked back.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I also know that you love fashion. You always look fantastic.
Oh,
so, yes. I think
you're
I've
so
asked
sweet.
you more often what shoes you're wearing, like what the brands of your shoes are, than if you want to go have lunch or something. I don't know. So, we hear this story so often that someone starts in the leasing office and then just finds this love for this industry. And you have obviously gone from leasing consultant to now running a very large property management company, actually just recently listed on NMHC's top 50, which is huge. So tell me a little bit about your career progression. So came back to multifamily, and then how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, thank you for that. I'm humbled to be where I am today. It's an honor to lead this company and to lead the people, and it's been a lot of fun. But how did I get here? So as I was sharing, I started in college. And when I finished school, I was dating my husband at the time who is, I was dating the man who's now my husband. He was my boyfriend at the time. Anyways, he had a job opportunity in Atlanta. We were living in Texas, and we moved to the Atlanta market. And it was there that I was looking for the right employer. I was still in this industry. But this is where I got into really high-end, high-rise luxury apartment leasing and sales. And from there, my career just progressed. Like I said, I've always had a knack for sales, and it wasn't because I was a salesperson. It was more because I think I was a good listener and wanted to really be helpful. It was something that was a part of me. And I guess I would say that's a part of, I wanted to be helpful to the people that were in front of me, and I had that desire. And so it just naturally kind of came through. And when I started in Atlanta, I was at this very high-profile development. I was recruited a couple of times in that market by different developers and ownership groups. So I changed companies a few different times just based upon, them discovering me and what I did. And there was one large multifamily REIT that I grew with and became an assistant manager and a property manager, and then went and was a multi-site manager. And this was before right before we made a move to Houston. My husband's job brought us back to the Texas market. We moved back, and from there, I grew and took on a role as a regional property a regional manager. And I had portfolio. It was a merchant builder based out of Houston that built really high end, very like the nicest of the nice in any market that they went into. And it was there that I had a portfolio that spanned from Houston to Atlanta to Dallas and Denver. And, it was a really interesting opportunity. And while I was the regional manager there, as I was saying, we'd go into each market and we would build really high-end, high-rise developments, mid-rise developments. But some of these developments would have rents, $20,000 plus dollars per month.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that we were doing these one-off developments. We would go in, we'd develop, we would recruit new people. There was not like this sense of culture that people really knew and were a part of. They didn't really know who we were because we were based out of Texas, but we were building in, all these different cities and states. And I realized at the time, I thought, gosh, we've got these beautiful assets that we're building. We have residents that are moving in, paying the highest rents in the city. And we don't have standards of excellence that we've set that are consistent with our brand and who we are and really what the expectations are of the residents. And so I raised my hand at the time internally within my organization and said, I'd like to move out of this role of being a regional manager and I'd like to create our learning and development department. And that's what I did. And I developed not only a cultural onboarding for every associate that joined our organization, regardless of where they started, but I set and established what were the standards of excellence that we wanted to exude at every community that we developed, regardless of the city, state, location, profile of the demographic. It was everything. So I created that, developed it, and then led a team that went out and trained it in every single market that we did. So obviously that was not a long-term sustainable model that I created, but I created it out of a passion for wanting to have a standard that we could say was our own. It was the way of being, the way of doing things. And really, it had to be that hands-on, firsthand learning and training and developing that I did with this group of people for them to understand the importance and value that they had in the success of the development they were working on.
Yeah, I love that story so much. Although I want to take a small detour from the actual story and talking about the people experience and just highlight something that you said that I think is so meaningful, and especially for our female listeners to this podcast who are excited about their opportunities to continue to grow and rise up in their careers. You said that you were a regional manager and you saw this gap and you realized that there was this missing centralization of the standard and the expectation for these assets. And you saw that you were moving residents in at the top price point in the market in these units, and they had expectations. They weren't being met. It was creating issues. And rather than just continuing to chug through it, you raised your hand and you said, hey, I want to go do this. We don't even have this here, but this is what I want to do. This is why we need to do it. I have so much respect for that. And I think that there's so many times where, especially, those of us who are rising up through the ranks, right, and starting off with bigger companies and feel like that's out of our place, right? It's not in our lane. I hear that so often where so many younger executives these days are saying well, I just need to stay in my lane. And I would argue that a huge part of the reason why I'm where I'm at why I am where I am today is because I've never stayed in my lane. So I always love to encourage it. So I want to showcase that. And if there's anything else you want to add to it and want to share with our listeners, I'd love for you to do that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think you actually recapped it better than I actually told the story originally. But you're right. I think people oftentimes are intimidated or they don't know they're afraid of just raising their hand and saying something.
Yeah.
Which I encourage people on my teams, throughout our organization, throughout the time, every team that I've ever led, raise your hand and share what you want to do, share what your dreams are, share what your goals are. Because I think without that, that's where innovation stops is if people aren't thinking, how do we do something different? You're not just hired to come in. And this is what I think is really interesting about my story, but so many other stories I've seen is when we're hiring great people, we're not hiring them to come in and do a job. We're hiring them because they're great. And from that are going to, we're going to grow them into something or grow the organization and go in directions that we never even thought possible without the right people. So,
Yeah.
thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you said that really well too. We hire people because we want to hear them, right? We heard something during our initial interviews with them or conversations with them that led us to feel like they would be a valuable member of our team. And so we hire them and we bring them into the team. And then at some point, I think everyone starts to feel like they're within a box and this is their lane and they stop using their voice. And I always try to emphasize with my team, as soon as you stop using your voice, you stop being heard. And like the only one who can decide whether or not you use your voice is you. And
Yeah.
we can encourage it as much as possible. And I feel like, especially you and I in the roles that we're in, it's so important to continue to push that into, those that are just coming into the workforce today. Like when you see something, say something. When you feel something, say something. Like
Yeah.
use your voice, because as soon as you stop using it, it stops being heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I agree with that so much. And, that's where you get great collaboration is where
Yeah.
people use their voices and fostering an environment where that is wanted, it is encouraged, it is praised,
yeah.
it is rewarded, is an incredible place to be in.
Yeah,
I've been
agreed.
in organizations before where your voice being heard is not wanted.
Yeah.
And I think when you've got a situation like that, when the people have no vision or they don't feel like that they're contributing to something, then they lose hope. It's not an environment that's creative that people can thrive. And I think that leads into what we were originally, when we were talking about the people. To me, it has been such a powerful thing, but something that's been part of my core forever is ensuring that every single person within an organization, whether I'm the leader as I am now or whether I was one of many leaders before, understand their value
Yeah.
and how they contribute individually. And they're the only one that can do that to the success of the organization. And I think when people understand that, not only do they embrace what they're doing, but they get very, very passionate. And those are the people that you see staying around for a very long time.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree with that more. I've worked at so many different types of companies, and there have, in full transparency, there have been companies that I've worked at that I probably should have been fired from because I didn't fit into their culture. Right?
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
didn't. Like,
yeah.
it was a culture of like, sit down and shut up and
Yeah.
do the job as like, here's your game plan.
And that's
here's
not you.
No.
Yeah.
That's
That's not
me
you.
at all,
Yeah.
right?
That's not me. That's not you.
No,
Yeah.
definitely not. But in the extreme alternative, to finally find the company where like that is not only embraced, but strongly encouraged. And that for those people who do just sit down and shut up, like it's not a great environment and those people aren't embraced. And they're constantly pushed to try to come out of their shell. And if they don't, it generally doesn't work out. It's a whole different world. So I
Yeah.
think finding where you fit and what works well for you, especially if you are vocal, like finding the space that embraces that is so, so valuable.
Yeah. I can't agree with you more. I think that's great.
Well,
Yep.
thank you for allowing me that little tangent.
Yeah.
But I just love that story so much. So, and I also love the story around, seeing an opportunity. So getting in and seeing that there was a need that matched the product that was being built. There was a service need that matched the product that wasn't being delivered, but that was needed. And then you delivered on that, on the product promise. You brought the service to the table. So what are you trying to do now? What's your vision now with
Yeah.
Elmington? And what is your focus and passion around as you are leading this company?
Yeah. So, let me take one step back.
Yeah.
So I was sharing that I got all the way up until, I'm really a lot older than you. And, I've been in this industry a very long time. And so I got up to the point where this was kind of back in the, let's say, 2000 to 2010 date range. After that, this company that I worked for, I'm telling you the story because it leads into, what I'm doing now. But this company
Yeah.
that I worked for, this was right after the 08-09 crisis.
Mhm.
They were merchant builders. They sold off all of their assets. And with that, everyone within the organization that was on the property management division basically was dissolved.
Mhm.
So it was at that point where, so I went from, being this really great salesperson, leader, seeing the gap, understanding the gap, and then filling that gap with service excellence to now I went out and I was looking for a new company, and I had a few different offers on the table, and I joined an organization that was a public REIT, and it was a national company. They were third-party managers, and what was interesting about this is, I'll be honest with you, I think this is where I started from that company, and a few that were right after that were where I started to really learn how to operate a business.
Okay.
With the company I was with before, we were merchant builders. We built, we leased them up, we sold. We
Yeah.
threw great parties. We, we had fun. We spent a lot of money.
Yep.
We weren't great operators because that was not the business model that we had.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I really moved into these other roles that I learned the financial. I grew a financial backbone. Like I
Yep.
really understood how to operate a business, and what my what was my responsibility of. I've been entrusted, and I'm a steward of what someone has entrusted me with, and what do I now do with it, and how do I operate this and make great recommendations. I don't think I had all that in me before. I knew the right things to do and the great service, but I didn't know all of the financial background. And so through the years, I still had this longing, and I would say desire and passion for training people and developing people and really making them great. And even within my own regions or my own portfolios, I would ensure that we were doing things that were different, that were just, made us stand out. And we really created value that perhaps throughout the entire organization may not have been the case, but it was something that we were doing specifically for our client group. And I say all that to say that, now as I have moved into my role at Elmington, and you remember, I joined Elmington as the Executive Vice President of Business Development.
Yeah.
And when I joined the company, a few people have heard me say this now, but I came into this organization. I made a big move to come here. I was excited about the organization. I'd had a lot of life changes. We became empty nesters for the first time. Both of our kids were in college, and decided to make this big leap to come to an organization that I really believed in. From the moment I met all the different individuals that I had the opportunity to meet with, and really understood the background of Elmington and why it was even created as an organization, and the spirit of entrepreneurship that it was built on, I knew that this was a place where I really wanted to be. And when I joined as the Executive Vice President of Business Development, I came in, and my job was to sell our third-party management business.
Yep.
It was not to come in and change the world.
Yep.
And so I decided I was going to come in with really a spirit of humility and curiosity. Humility meaning that I respect everything that has already been created and the foundation that was there. I had this curiosity. I wanted to understand, I saw that we did things differently, and they weren't the same as what were being done out in some of the big, large organizations. And through that process, I saw there were gaps, and I think every organization has gaps. I saw that there were gaps, but I thought, you know what, this is, as I have the opportunity to, voice, ideas or different things that I think could be, that we could improve on, that's great. But that was not my vision and goal in that role. And it was interesting because when I moved into the role of president, the opportunity came around, and I was offered the job. I was super excited because I not only cherished and valued where we'd come from, but I also now had the opportunity to say, okay, I do see the gaps, and I understand how we could become a better organization than where we are today, and this is how we're going to do it. So getting to the answer of your original question of what am I doing with Elmington today? So Elmington, in the as we've grown over the last 11 years, we have grown in such a fast way. We've brought in great people. As we grew, we identified great people, like we were talking about before, and brought them in to be a part of this organization. But through that, we didn't necessarily scale all of our policies and processes. We kind of brought in great people, allowed these great people to continue operating the way that they had been operating before, and we didn't necessarily have a consistency throughout our organization.
Yep.
And so what I'm doing now is I'm taking a step back and really evaluating all the different things that we are doing in different ways and creating what is our Elmington way. But what does that even mean? The Elmington way is not just identifying a bunch of processes and policies, but the Elmington way is creating a way of being, a way of us coming to work, who we are, what do we stand for? When we are doing these processes, what is that translating into from a customer experience? And our customer, as you said earlier, is, our client. It's our prospects. It's our residents. It's our vendors. It's each other. So a way of being where we are really setting the high standard of excellence in our industry, of the delivery of that customer service. And this all goes back to, you know, allowing and really translating the vision of what our organization is doing into our people so that they understand you individual, you are valuable. And without you, we can't do this. And so you showing up every day and coming to the table with an excitement about what you're doing every single day is what's making us successful.
Oh, I love all of this so much. There's so many things I feel like to unpack there, so much wisdom in that. I will say that one of the things that I've always loved the most about Elmington is the core values, right?
Hmm.
They're not your typical core values.
No, they're not.
And that some of them are even a little controversial, but I think one of them that isn't controversial, but I do think that it takes us a step beyond, is treat amazing people amazingly,
Yeah.
right? I think Elmington tries to assume from day one that everyone that joins the team is amazing. Like,
Hmm.
you have to prove us wrong. We're going to assume it from day one, and we're going to treat you like you're amazing from day one with as many benefits as we possibly can. So whether that's, your PTO bank starting day one, you don't have to wait for it to start accruing, or for your 401k to kick in immediately, or benefits, or whatever that is. As day one, like, you're a part of the team and you're amazing just like everybody else. And I think that goes to your employee experience, which is like, you are valuable. And because you're valuable, you deserve to know why we're doing what we're doing, why we expect you to show up the way that we expect you to show up. And that creates a whole new feeling around the experience of coming to work every day.
Yeah. You're so right. And one other thing we do really well is we give our employees great swag.
Yeah, we do.
we, we do really great swag. And we give them that from day one, too.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Not only do they feel appreciated from day one, but then it translates through every single thing that we do. And you made such a great point, because oftentimes when an associate is hired, you come in and people feel like they have to prove what they're here for. And obviously, you want every single person to come in and just hit the ground running and be a part and contribute and be excited about being a part of the team. But I love how you express that, which is so true, that we value you from day one.
Yeah.
We hired you because we believe that you're an amazing person. And because of that, you're already treated that way from day one. You don't have to prove that you're amazing.
Yeah.
You're going to come in, and because that we are treating you amazingly, you're going to then be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually read quite a few studies on this, which is really interesting. And they actually did a lot of studies around children on this, where so one of the most famous studies that was done was where they took an entire elementary school, and they tested the children. And then they came back to the teachers and said, here are the children that tested super high on these, that scored very high on these tests. And they obviously have the biggest potential, right? The most potential. And so the teachers, but they were like, you can't tell the kids this. You can't do anything differently about it. We just want to tell you, but you can't do anything differently with it. And the teachers started to have a higher expectation of performance out of those children, right? They showed up more for them, and they were encouraging to them. And even sometimes when it failed, when the kids weren't performing, the teachers thought to themselves, oh, this must be me. Like, it must be me that there's something wrong with, because the kids tested high. They tested well. So it must be me. So I need to accommodate my teaching standards. Well, by the end of the year, those children were outperforming all of the other children on all the tests, but they weren't higher performers on those tests. It was all fabricated for the teachers. So it proved quite a few things, like that if the teachers had an expectation, and then if the children were treated as though there was a higher expectation and encouraged and motivated throughout that whole process, then it actually did lead to better results.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing happens with our teams. Like, if we tell our teams, like, we're showing up for you because we believe in you, we're here for you, we have high expectations for you, that we can achieve those same end results.
Yeah.
So
I've read some of those similar studies, and they're so incredible, because it does just emphasize the power of positive affirmation too.
Yes.
Like positive words, positive affirmation, and giving back to the people that are around you. So there's a lot of organizations that rule by kind of dictatorship, or rule by fear, or rule by a lot of ways. But the ones that you get the most, I think, energy and output from are the ones that people feel like they are excited, that they feel valued, that they are affirmed throughout the course of their career. And that goes back to, we've talked before about when you set standards of excellence, how do you ensure that those standards of excellence are actually implemented and followed through with? And, it comes back to rewarding and affirmation. So making things that this goes back to that book I told you I was reading earlier before we started the podcast, The Friction Project.
Yeah.
And it really goes back to making the things that you want to be, you want your teams to do easy, and the things you don't want them to do very hard.
Yeah.
And part of that ease is identifying ways to streamline and automate, and to the extent that we can make the responsibilities of what they're doing easy to do. But it also goes back to, when people have the opportunity to be rewarded, affirmed, praised in public in front of their peers, this is also going to get that reaction that you want, because they know that just like if you feed a dog a cookie or a treat, that they're going to continue to shake your hand. They'll shake as long as you're handing them these things. But it's the same thing, because they're feeling rewarded and they're feeling praised. And not that any of our people are like our pets, although my pets, I think, are the most valuable things in the world, aside from my children and my husband. But I think that it's it's the same philosophy, is that they get very excited about being rewarded for the things that they're doing well, and creating and fostering an environment where people feel excited about doing the right things. You're just going to see it multiply over and over again, and it's not going to be something that you have to sit there and like crack the hammer on. I don't think that's the right figure of speech, but
hammer works. It's okay.
Yeah. I always get all those mixed up, and so I'm like, that's
okay.
not right.
But
you know where I was going
with
it. But no, creating an environment where people enjoy being there and enjoy doing the right things is what we're looking to achieve.
Yeah. And I love what you said. I'm going to go on another tangent here for a minute, because I think you're going to appreciate this one, actually. But I really like what you said about praising publicly. So I think there's so much value in providing constructive criticism. I really do. In fact, I think most of us really crave it. I think if you were to survey the vast majority of the workforce today and ask them, like, do you want your leader to be very honest and open and blunt with you about what you aren't doing well? They would say, yes, like, heck yes. I want to know what I can do to improve, right? So constructive criticism is so valuable. But I think doing that behind closed doors versus intentionally praising publicly is so valuable.
Yeah.
And I bring this up actually specifically because you and I have both worked directly with one of my favorite humans of all time, Kerri Rosenblum, who I have worked with for almost 12 years now, who has directly made probably the largest impact on who I am as a human today, because he has challenged me so directly and with such constructive criticism, but always respectfully and behind closed doors, but in a way that has challenged me to think beyond what I ever thought I could do, right? Like, he pushes me in ways that, almost feels completely unreasonable at times, right? He's like, we need to do this. And I'm like, that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, we're never going to be able to do that. And then 3 months later, we're doing that because
you're like, yes, we are.
Because he pushed.
Yeah.
And I think that, so many things successes that we've seen in the world and innovation that's happened has come from those things that a lot of us would say are unreasonable. Like, unreasonable expectations create, like, truly change the world.
Yeah.
And so, but I think there's a time and place for the affirmations publicly, but for the constructive criticism and the challenge and the push, one-on-one, that can create so much value.
Yeah, I love that. I would have to agree with you about Kerri. I share with him every time, after every one-on-one we have. I always thank him, because I'm like, this has really been not only enlightening, but a gift,
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's not the easiest conversations, and they are challenging, but you go away with a renewed excitement about what you're doing. And what I've encouraged internally with our teams, with our leadership group, and even with the individuals, is having a real paradigm shift on constructive criticism and performance improvement. I think in the past, and in many organizations, constructive criticism and performance improvement have been looked at in a very negative way, like, oh, I'm not doing my job well, or is this a step to me not being part of the company?
Yeah.
And I have rephrased that and shifted that mindset in each conversation I've had the privilege of being a part of to say, no, as a matter of fact, this is the complete opposite. This is a gift that you should receive and say thank you because it's allowing it. Not only do we care enough and are taking the time to say, these are the things that you could be doing better to improve the performance of not only yourself, but your team, the organization, but it's also you being able to have that ability to say, gosh, I now see this that maybe I didn't see before. And I can become better.
Yeah.
An organization or an individual who does not, I said this earlier, who does not continue to improve becomes obsolete because there's the world is constantly changing and constantly improving. So the constructive criticism piece is part of that whole life cycle.
Yeah, I agree so much. And I am humble enough to admit that I have had conversations with Kerri Rosenblum more than once where I have left with tears in my eyes, whether those were tears of frustration, of anger, of humility, of sadness, of whatever, of frustration, whatever it is. Like, absolutely, like they're hard conversations to have, but those are the conversations that challenge you and grow you as a human. So you're not alone.
I'll say I've had a couple, and I think my heart was more in the place of not wanting to disappoint.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't want and he would always turn it back around. This isn't. No, it's not that. It's that we could be doing this, this, and this. It's not about disappointment. And so I've had to change my mindset about that too.
Yeah. Agreed. Such a learning experience. Getting back to our, again, thank you for allowing me that tangent, but getting back to our original topic. So you said something earlier where you said in creating standards of excellence, you really want to figure out what you can do that's different. And I think you said, and I quote, stand out. What are the things that you're looking to do now that are different or stand out? Or what are some of the ideas that you have that you're thinking about implementing?
Yeah. So great question. And I'll give you some examples of things that were very innovative and unorthodox in the past that are now things that we're doing, that we're now taking that and saying, okay, how do we take this same concept, meaning something that was unheard of or not really even thought of at all, and how do we now change this? So way back when, this goes back to the early 2000s age again with that group that we were working, that very high-end high-rise group. And one of the things, this is back before the days of like, believe it or not, DoorDash and Uber Eats and Grubhub and, really restaurant delivery. And one of the things that we did was we created what we called, I'm trying to remember, I think it was more of like premier partnerships, but we created like in-house accounts that we would partner with nearby very high-end steakhouses or restaurants that were near these luxury high-rises that we had built to actually have food delivery coming in right into their homes. Now, that doesn't sound overly innovative, but think about it. At the time, the only way that you would ever get that is if you were staying at a hotel and you ordered room service. Or if you went down and you picked up food to go, but you didn't have restaurant delivery back then. And this was, again, going into the early 2000s. So it was really an interesting concept to have, and especially at very high-end restaurants. You had them from like pizza places and all that, but you didn't have like, a Fleming Steakhouse or a here a 1230 club that's, delivering steaks to your front door. Like that was unheard of. And so, thinking of ways of really doing business in a different way or having these different offerings. So, for example, like when we're talking about, projects that we have and customer experience, thinking about ways of bringing experiences to our customers who are our residents or who are our prospects that are not being offered at other places. We've got examples such as bars that we've put inside of the actual apartment communities themselves. So you don't have to go down the street. You can actually have, a happy hour there within your community. We're doing, cooled towel service out by the pools and popsicles and, chilled water and all those different things. I mean, there's some of these are not necessarily out of the box, but it's things that have come in waves of ideas over the past that have come in and out and aren't necessarily what you would say the standard service offerings at most communities. So thinking of ways that we can do things that are not overly expensive, but that just create that little extra level of service that allow us to stand out. And it all comes back to, you can have all the services in the world, but if you don't know how to sell those to either your residents or your prospects, you end up they're not as important. So being able to sell that lifestyle, and that's comes back to the training, the development, and getting people excited about what they're doing.
Yeah, which I think it actually starts with selling it internally, right? You mean your internal team has to understand the why behind it. They just understand the value of the service that's being provided and sold. And I would say maybe you're right. Maybe some of these things aren't, super out of the box. Although I don't know, maybe I would argue that trying to provide, chilled towels and popsicles and those sorts of things in an apartment community is actually a little bit unreasonable almost. Like, right there, I mean, there could be a lot of owners that would say that's an unreasonable expense for a property. But if you can prove out the value of it through the commitment of the residents who stay there because they have children and they're never leaving the apartment community that serves popsicles by the pool, right? Because their kids are entertained all summer long, then you can really create something special. So I think there is this world in which, taking that next step and saying, this actually seems unreasonable or sounds unreasonable, but if you can prove out the value, you can create something really special.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I love it, actually. That's really exciting. I love something else that you said earlier, too. So you mentioned that you came to Elmington with a spirit of curiosity and humility. And I think that those are actually two skills that specifically in customer service, which I think the majority of property management, our industry is, right? We are providing a service. We're a service-based industry. But teaching our team members to operate in a world of curiosity and humility, right? Always assuming that, even with each other. So if a team member shows up 15 minutes late, assuming that something's wrong, right? Rather than just saying like, why are you late? Instead being like, are you okay? Like, this isn't like you, or, this obviously, how important this is to us. So is everything okay? Like, did something happen? And making that assumption across the board with everyone. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that. Like, what brought you into Elmington with curiosity and humility? Where does that come from for you, and what does that mean for you?
That's a great question. So I was thinking of a couple of different things. I'm not going to write down my notes because then I'll get distracted. But here's the thing. I think over the years, I spend a lot of time. Well, I spend a lot of time in the Bible. Which I think really grounds me to what my core beliefs are and who I am. And I say all that to say that I'm not trying to go down any sort of path to,
I mean, if you want to debate religion on a podcast.
Yeah. I know. No, I know. We've talked about this before. No, but I think that's where I would say the humility comes in. I recognize that in my past, throughout my career, as I shared with you earlier, I was recruited many times to go with other organizations. And so I went in kind of with this, like, I'm being recruited for my skills, my value, my experience, what they want for me to bring to the table.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that in this position. I wanted to come in and not be the person with all the ideas and let me tell you how to change things and be better. I don't know that that was the best approach. I probably made many, many mistakes in the past. And so I decided with this group that as I was joining this company, I really respected this organization and the people so much that I thought, you know what, I want to take a step back and I don't want to come in I don't want to have all the ideas and let me tell you how to change things. That wasn't what I was doing. I wanted to come in, I wanted to learn. I wanted to be a person of learning. And so that's where I think the curiosity came in too. But a sense of humility, I think, doesn't always naturally come to people.
100%.
A lot of times it's a part of something that you work on and that you grow into over a course of time.
Yeah.
Recognizing that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room and the loudest person in the room and the, whatever. It's coming in and just being a part of an organization of great people was what I was excited about. And I would share that, you were talking about earlier, the assuming the best of people. And I would say that this goes all the way back to when I was really creating a standard of excellence in our customer service delivery. And part of this comes, a really great story, and where this comes into play that I don't know that I connected that it was humility at the time, but I was thinking, we've got leasing professionals that oftentimes they feel like telephone's ringing and like that is an annoyance. It is annoying.
Yes.
The phone's
Yep.
ringing. They're probably calling asking the same question that the other 20 people that called today are asking, and you just get really tired of it. And I thought, I spent a lot of time with the groups that I was developing over the course of many years to really communicate the importance of when someone's coming in asking or asking a question. They don't know that 20 other people that day have asked the same question.
Yeah.
They're not, they're assuming that this is a unique question. It's unique to them. They're a prospect. They're looking for their new home, and they really just are asking for help.
Yeah.
And for our attitude to ever be anything other than, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to help you. Let me tell you, let me answer that question for you. But for it to be like, well, yeah, we've got this apartment. We're available then. No, we should never have anyone feel like that they are an inconvenience or that we are not thrilled to help them. But that doesn't always naturally come. You really have to take people back and shift their mindset of why are people calling in? Are they calling in oftentimes now because you can get so much information off the internet?
Mm-hmm.
If they're actually calling, they're calling because they are a really hot lead and they've got a question or probably
interested.
Exactly. They're very, very interested. And so I think that can be applied in so many areas of life. But I shared that because it really resonated at the time that oftentimes it's because we've got an attitude that is not humble, or it's not like a spirit of I'm here to be helpful and I'm here to fulfill the needs and help you fulfill a need that you have. It gets into this more of an annoyance. And I have worked very, very hard internally, and I think throughout different organizations I've been a part of, and especially Elmington, that we always want to be as gracious and as generous as we can when anyone has, we're interacting with anyone, whether it's a client or a prospect or a resident. We have jobs because of these people, and we're here to serve them.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. You said that about humility not being our natural state. And I think that is so accurate. And actually, on our first kind of intro episode to this podcast, William was interviewing me and asked me who my biggest challenge was or has been throughout property management, whether that was at the Elmington or Fortress or whatever. And I said, honestly, very early on, I would have told you it was the residents because the only time complaints mostly came to me was by the time, my team had already done as best they possibly could or to deal with the situation and to make it better. And so by the time the complaint gets to me, I'm only hearing half of the story. Then I have to reach out. And, it's a lot of he said, she said. And so it's just very difficult. But today, my biggest obstacle is myself. Like my biggest obstacle is like getting past my own assumptions of situations or my own ego or, finding that humility and curiosity rather than my own interpretation or assumption or thinking that I know the answer rather than listening to everyone else first. In fact, one of my team members who is always honest with me has said before that I'm too quick to make an assumption on a situation. So if there's something happening and there's a bit of trouble or there's a problem that's brewing, I'm too quick to try to jump in and fix it and make an assumption on what the fix is rather than allowing the situation to unfold. And I do know that about myself. And I love that my team can be so honest with me about it. But I agree. I think taking the time to find that humility and that curiosity and the way that you did it when you and I first started working together, you created an experience for everyone else around you that then led to everyone wanting you to move up into the position that you're in. So I think emphasizing that for a second and just saying that, we came here today to talk about the people experience. And we've talked about a lot of different types of people experiences, but the experience that you give to people by who you are and how you present yourself and how you intentionally choose to show up with curiosity or humility or not, or assumptions and ego directly impacts your career path and your success and your ability to be chosen and to have a seat at the table. So I think it's always, it's just a lesson we learned. I think something to think about.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for saying that. That resonates. That means a lot. I agree with you.
yeah.
I was just thinking about the experience that we create for our associates, and something that was shared with me actually this week was, and I think this goes back to the people feeling valued. something I had implemented in the training for our sales teams, but has always been a very important. I don't know that I sat back and thought, oh, this is important, I'm going to write this down. I think it just was important for me in human interaction is that people knew that I knew who they were.
Yeah.
And someone shared with me this week that a new associate had started at Elmington recently. And I knew we had all these new associates and I knew the names of the people that were starting. And I walked up and I said, oh, you must be so-and-so.
Yeah.
And when I walked away, that person turned to the other person who was sharing this with me and said, DeAnna knew my name. And I thought, well, of course I know your name. When she told me later, I thought, well, of course I do.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's something that is emphasized and is important for leaders and organizations today, which trickles down throughout your entire organization.
Yep.
And I'm not patting myself on the back because it's not about me or doing a thing, but more so about it goes back to that people thing.
Yeah.
When I was sharing, which I started to share a second ago, is that part of the customer experience, meaning the resident experience that I emphasized with our sales teams many years ago was calling people by name, being able to learn who your residents are and say, oh, good morning, so-and-so, good morning, Mrs. Smith, Mr. Smith, Beth, whomever, being able to recognize people and because that in itself, when people hear their name, it's like the happiest that they ever are. When people are recognized and someone recognizes them, they're thinking, oh, okay, I feel valued. I feel welcome.
Yep.
I feel wanted here. And that in itself is resident retention.
Yep.
It absolutely is. And so unless something just completely goes off the rails, that in itself is one step towards that. And it's the same with our associates and our employees, because if we're saying that we value you, then we should know who you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very, very important piece of building a strong organization.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love what you said. When people feel welcome,
Yeah.
like across the board, whether that's your residents, your team members, your vendors, your owners, when they feel welcome, it really changes the entire environment.
Yeah.
So I have enjoyed this conversation so much, and I want to ask you, is it okay?
Yeah, it's okay. I don't know you're going to like my answer, but yes, it's okay. Please ask away.
Well, I would love for you to share a story of property management with us. Any story that you want to share, any experience that you've had, funny, sad, angry, whatever, about residents, customer service, your on-site team, however you want to share. Love to hear a story.
Okay, if I'm being very honest with you, I said I was going to say this. I feel like I got thrown a loop at the beginning of this podcast.
You did.
And I didn't want my mind to be thinking about the story and not concentrating on the conversation I was having with you. I don't know. I have so many stories. But I think that the best ones that I think back on are about people that have been able to impact. I mean, not me personally, but I guess through and by way of just spending time with people, being able to impact. I don't know. I hate this. I hope we cut this whole thing out at the very end because sometimes I'm not good on my feet when I'm like, let me think of one story and I want it to be impactful. And I don't feel like I've got like this impactful story to tell you. 10 minutes from now when I'm driving back to the office, I'm going to have like an incredible story to share. But
well, how about this? We'll save it for the next time you're here.
Let's do it.
Yes.
Please have me back.
Yes,
and
I
I will
will
come prepared with a story to tell you at the very end.
I will. See, now I have to do it.
I know.
Now I'm eager
and I
for this
appreciate
story.
you saving me at the end of this podcast.
Well, DeAnna, thank you so much for coming in and having this conversation with me. I can honestly say that the experience I've had with you in, just less than a year that we've experienced together has been really incredible. So I can't think of someone better to discuss the people experience with me. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kerri. Thanks for having me.